The head of the World Trade Organization has told Arise News that the global trade body stands ready to support African countries in implementing the new regional free trade agreement. Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala spoke to Arise business correspondent Rotus Odiri at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Here is his report.
The problem with trade from Ukraine is that they couldn't carry out their trade because of the blockade on the Black Sea ports. But where trade is now is that we've actually projected quite a steep decrease in the growth of trade. So last year in 2022, we had a growth rate that we projected of 3.5%. We've reduced that to 1% for 2023. And there's a lot of uncertainty around that forecast. So a lot depends on what happens with the war in Ukraine, as you know, with climate events. A lot also depends on what happens with the way that China is opening up. There could be a further downside, actually a contraction, if things don't go well with monetary tightening by central banks. But if things go well, we could also see an upside. But right now, it's 1%. But let me say this, in spite of that, trade volumes are high when we talk about merchandise trade, and digitally delivered services trade is growing at a phenomenal rate, 14% a year. So trade will be part of the solution for bringing us out of the crisis that we're in, for the recovery, for global recovery.
Director General, I want to ask you about disputes. 3 months into your tenure, China reported Australia to the WTO over tariffs on its exports to Australia. Also, they most recently reported the United States for restrictions of semiconductors exports to China. How are you dealing with disputes this year?
Well, as you know, part of the function of the WTO is that it has a dispute settlement system, but perhaps the only one in the world, the only global one that members come to when they disagree with each other or they think that WTO rules have been violated. So, of course, members brought these disputes. But the point that we're saying to them is that it's probably better to try and mediation, dialogue with each other, to try to resolve issues. That is far better, it's faster, and it's more amicable. So that's what we're doing. Yes, it's right, true that there were issues with China, Australia. There were issues with China and Lithuania and the EU, the US versus the EU and so on. But we're encouraging dialogue first. And I think it's working. We've got the EU talking to the US about the Inflation Reduction Act. South Korea is doing the same. So instead of bringing a dispute to the panel, they are trying dialogue. So let's see how that resolves.
With less than 2 weeks to the deadline for the deposit of old Naira notes, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, this week began an on-the-spot assessment of automated teller machines across the country with a view to forcing compliance with the directive to issue redesigned Naira currency notes. Here's a report.
This bank comes as no surprise. Like most banks, its automated teller machines are dispensing old Naira notes. The deadline for the validity of the old notes is less than 2 weeks away. Officials of the Central Bank of Nigeria are here to find out why old Naira bills are still being dispensed by ATMs.
We came to the bank to get the new notes, nowhere to be found. They told us that there was no money, no new notes yet, and they said we should be bringing our own old currency to come and deposit. If you deposit your old currency now, how will you now do transaction?
On a daily basis, I'm coming here.
And you'll be getting 1,000
old notes.
Okay.
It's the first bank, I'll get new notes.
Okay.
A visit to other banks also showed low compliance rate. Commercial bank officials who spoke off camera say it's a supply issue. The central bank says the complaints will be investigated with defaulters sanctioned.
Some of the thing is that the new notes are out, but either the banks are not picking it from central bank or the monitor mechanism will reveal what really happened. Whether they are diversion of the new Naira note to other uses, we don't know. But basically, what we have seen is that some ATMs are dispensing new notes, whereas others are dispensing old notes. So those that are dispensing old notes, we'll check our record and see what stock have they gotten from central bank and how they have utilized it. Where there are diversions, obviously we might need to penalize.
The exercise is beyond checking the compliance at commercial banks. The financial regulator also took its outreach outside the city centre to communities within the outskirts of Abuja. At the Palace of the Honor of Abaji, a local government area in the Federal Capital Territory, the aim is to partner with traditional leaders to educate their people on the need to deposit old notes and accept the redesigned currencies.
I want to appeal for the extension of the term in order to give room for more awareness, most especially those at the rural area. If that one can be acceptable, I think we will appreciate it. Because up to now, some of our people are even see the money, the new Naira with their eye.
The mission is to get everyone on board before the deadline, and religious leaders are not left out. At the Al-Noor Mosque within Abuja City, the CBN seeks the collaboration of clerics to help disseminate the message to their followers.
Particularly those in the rural areas, they need to act very fast and very quickly and make sure that they deposit all their old notes so that we don't want them to lose their level of investment. Even though by the new currency, everything is now, more of it will get into the bank. And by the analysis that we have conducted, there will be more, getting into the bank than the money that is going to be used to produce the new currencies. So it's a positive thing to do, actually for economic development.
While the CBN remains positive that full compliance will be achieved by this weekend, following the monitoring exercise across the country, the regulator says the repercussions for non-compliance will not be overlooked for any bank that is found wanting. Oni Sunday, Arise News.
Mukhtar Mohammed is a financial analyst, and he joins us now for what he considers his takeaways from the recently concluded World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and the Central Bank of Nigeria's follow-up activities concerning the designed currency notes. Thank you very much, Mukhtar Mohammed.
My pleasure, sir.
For joining us. Okay, quickly. The World Economic Forum ended on Friday, but there are major takeaways. Mm-hmm. Some people have talked about climate, they've talked about global trade, they've talked about the war in Ukraine, they've talked about the global economy. But for you, what are those major takeaways?
I think I have like 2 or 3 major takeaways. Number one, I think the global economy, when you're looking at inflation, for the first time we are seeing all the world central bank talking about inflation, how to couple to fight inflation. For me, that's the takeaway. Then secondly, they talked about talking to China to see how they can open up the economy so that they can be, instead of the zero COVID tolerance level. And we've seen China begin to do that, opening up their economy. Also, for me, that's a good takeaway, because when there's growth in China, more or less like if there's growth, especially in the second or third world. Then I think the last one has to do with trying to see distribution of wealth or through trade inequality. I think that's a good one, but again, how they are going to implement that is going to be a major challenge, because especially when you look at developing economies, especially in Africa and other parts of the world, whereby the difference, the gap between the rich and the poor keep expanding by the day. So for me, if they could, the major takeaways, those 3 points.
Okay, but why Davos? Because that was a question that has been raised by some commentators. Why do we need a Davos somewhere in Switzerland, in Europe, where people go to in their private jets, they drink coffee, caffeinated carbon dating and all of speed dating, it is called. And then they decide for the rest of the world.
Well, so I think
why must we worry about Davos?
I think we need to worry about it because the world has become a global village. So they are looking for where they could all sit down and talk in one voice, even if we know that the voice is not one, But definitely, we are seeing what we see in Davos. We see the developed economy coming out to tell us what they want to do for the developing economy. At the end of the day, is the result that really matters. But for the past years, we've not seen those results come out. But there's still Davos. It has become like a ritual now that every year there must be a World Economic Summit where the developed nations sit down to talk, to print, for me, a roadmap for themselves, not really for the other economy of the world.
Well, the Minister of Finance of Nigeria was there. And one of the points she made in a conversation with the Arise News correspondent, Rotu Sudiri, is that, before June, Nigeria needs to start a gradual removal of a subsidy. Do you think that gradual removal has started already?
It has started.
Given the situation in which we find ourselves.
It has started because when you see NNPC selling fuel at 185, and the government say, no, we've not done any increment. You see other private filling stations selling at 260 here in Lagos, and nothing is being done. Definitely we've started. So that's all about deregulation. I think the minister was the one that was saying that we didn't give any, we didn't ask anybody to increase fuel price. I'm very sure by the time we hear from NNPC in the coming weeks, it will be, that is the language when it comes to deregulation. So for me, I think we've started. What Nigerians are interested in is having those fuel, because some of people that have enjoyed those privilege of buying at 165 or 175, it's only in Lagos. You go to places like Kaduna, they are buying at 300, some places are buying at 400. So definitely if you want to deregulate, then deregulate. Let know we are in deregulation, because you can't be saying 3 trillion is being paid for deregulation. You want to help the masses, and the masses are the ones suffering, for me.
No, but organized labor is saying that if government removes subsidy, that they will go on strike and that they will disrupt the system.
Doctor, who will answer them?
Global.
Who will answer them?
Who will answer who?
Who will answer the organized labor? Who is the organized labor? That sit down and see a blind eye when Nigerians are suffering? What have they said since there's no been for? What protests have they organized? The government have come out since October telling us that there's enough quantity of petroleum product to go around. And we have not seen that. Prices of transportation have gone up for the ordinary Nigerian. Who is organized labor?
Organized labor is Nigerian Labor Congress.
Are they still existing?
Union Congress.
Are they still existing?
When
you talk about the Trade Union Congress, you talk about NUPEN, you talk about Pengesi. Who are those people that are involved in this out of petroleum increment? Who are the people that benefit from it? Who are the people that move this product from point A to point B? Who are the people that owns the filling stations? So they are not just being truthful. We need to stop playing politics with our economy and come out with the truth and tell the people this is what it entails. We know as it stands now, we cannot continue to enjoy subsidy, because subsidy is not doing the ordinary Nigerian any good. It's rather putting more money to the rich.
Okay. Look, with regard to the World Trade Organization now, which was also a major stakeholder and participant at this forum in Davos. We saw Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala saying that WTO will support African trade and all of that. Really, what difference can the WTO make with regard to trade from Africa with regard to the rest of the world?
No, the WTO cannot make anything. I mean, they've tried to. The only thing, we have the African Continental Trade Agreement, which was something that we came together to sign within ourselves, and up to this moment, we've not been able to implement it. We've not been seeing trade between African and Africa. How many trade does Nigeria even do with Ghana? How many trade does African trade? We trade more with the Europeans and the North Americans, the Americans, and other than with ourselves. Because when you look at the competitive advantage, think about infrastructure, you think about the cost of goods and services. We've not come to that policy whereby we do business seamlessly. We come in here, you're supposed, when you do the African Continental Trade Agreement, you're supposed to bring your product into Nigeria and it will not be taxed, so that it will be cheaper than what you bring outside the shore of this country.
Tariffs.
But the tariff is still there, and those tariffs are still very high, very, very high. So definitely, most people still prefer to do business with China, from Europe, because it seems more cheaper than even doing business from Nigeria to Ghana. So definitely, what the WTO should be doing to us is to come up and begin to build those infrastructure so that we can have slim trade within ourselves, especially in the reduction of the costs.
Okay. Well, we've talked about the Global Economic Forum, World Economic Forum in Davos. Issues about global disruption, issues about climate change, issues about Africa, issues about what could be the possible fallouts from that place. But, you know, the second leg of the story, as I introduced it, has to do with the Central Bank of Nigeria and these new notes. The Central Bank of Nigeria says it will sanction the banks for, in fact, refusing to come and collect
the new notes.
The new notes. And we're told that the deadline is January 31. Why do you think that the banks don't want to collect the new notes?
Because the central bank has not done their work very well.
No, the central bank is saying it will sanction the banks that don't
want
want to
have the central bank done, doctor? What have the central bank done? You're talking about the traditional ruler there. We listen to the traditional say that even his own people do not even know that they are going to change these notes. So when we talk about what the central bank should have been doing, is what they say they are trying to do now, meeting traditional rulers. This policy came into effect, they said it will start by December 15. They even went ahead and launched it with Mr. President before December 15. And they were doing all that. They never thought of the rural area. These days, when you want to do where is the National Orientation Agency doing? Have you seen any jingle enlightening them? Nobody seems to be doing anything. So you need to, what about the POS people in the rural area? How are you empowering them to collect the old note to bring to the banks? The central bank have not been able to come up with a strategy that will all encompass both the rural and the urban. They have concentrated more on the urban area. The rural people will still, some of them still don't want to collect even the new note. So why do you expect the bank to take those same notes to them and say them, because the enlightenment has to come from the central bank. I've then gone out to the traditional, I've then been using the town crier, I've then gone to the market women. Have we seen the National Orientation Agency that is practically in every local government in Nigeria? Have they used them as a means of reaching out to the people to enlighten the people about the new Naira? For me, as far as it's concerned, as far as mobilization is concerned, as far as information dissemination is concerned, the central bank has not done well.
Well, the same central bank says the money is available. The same central bank, since 2 Saturdays ago, began what they call public enlightenment, okay? And they have told us that they are open to ideas. Are you advising the Central Bank of Nigeria to follow the lead of the Senate of the Federal Republic that says that, look, the deadline for this new notes should be extended till June?
Well, I'm not of that opinion. Why? Basically, it's an economic policies. It has a side effect. Remember that the Monetary Policy Committee, one of the tools that the CBN used to fight inflation is reducing liquidity into the system. We must ask ourselves, why did the CBN, one of the reasons the CBN gave us for the redesign of the Naira note is that almost 80% of the currencies are not in the banking space. They need to bring them to the banking space because one of those tools that they use to fight inflation is reduction in liquidity. And if they don't have this liquidity in the banking space, how do they fight inflation, which has become a global monster? So if you are now saying that we have to extend it, does that mean that the CBN will keep hiking rate and then creating more inflation, and that will become a more damaging effect on the economy? Because that is one of the tools that you need to use now. We are looking at exchange rate volatility. We realize that after the CBN came with this policy, remember before then the exchange rate between the Naira and the dollar was almost 900. By the time they came with this policy, we saw that rate drop because what we have observed is that most of the Naira that are pursuing the little dollars are not Naira that are in the banking space. They are Naira that have been gotten through fraudulent activities that are in the hands of few Nigerians. So definitely, if you now say you want to extend this policy, it will make a nonsense of whatever gain that they seem to have gained, even in the area of inflation.
Okay, Mukhtar Mohammed, I know that this buggy about money supply has been questioned by other economists who say that what the central bank is telling us is actually not the truth about money supply. But let me ask you, moving beyond the redesigned currency notes, what's your take on the travails of the Central Bank of Nigeria's governor? He's back after a long leave, and people are saying, oh, the DSS is looking for him. I mean, what are the implications for financial stability?
Very big implication, because number one, we must go to the CBN Act.
Section 11.
That said that the CBN governors can only be removed by 2/3 of the National Assembly and the recommendation from the Mr. President.
That's Section 11.
So if they are not doing that, then how do you want to remove? You remember that even the removal of Lamido Sanusi Lamido by the former president was questioned in court, and court said that was an illegal removal. So we have an act. So it's the Mr. President that is supposed to recommend the sack of the CBN governor. And as it stands now, the CBN governor seems to be enjoying his support. Now, Is there ways that they would have intervened before that would have been able to take the CBN governor legitimately out of there with type of accusation? It would have worked, because we have seen the CBN leave their core area of competence, intervening in where they shouldn't intervene. And at that time, nobody said anything. We saw the CBN governor, which because of this, you remember the CBN Act was enacted because they don't want the CBN government to be political or to fraternize with politicians. We saw a CBN governor that is plier and everything was all over, that he wanted to become the president of Nigeria. At that time, the House was not doing anything about him. Nobody calls him to order. Nobody told Mr. President that, nobody moved a motion to challenge Mr. President and said, we have a CBN governor that wants to be political. We think he should be removed. We think we should call him to order. Now that it involved the redesigning of Naira note, which people have ascribed that it will stop, it will guide against vote buying, all of a sudden the CBN governor must be removed by the National Assembly, even without recommendation from the Mr. President. So for me, I think it's something that we shouldn't do it. We should look at the legitimate part of it. And if Mr. President think that the CBN governor has been involved in anything, I think he should write a letter to the National Assembly. The two-thirds of the National Assembly give a vote of no confidence in the CBN governor, or diplomatically tell the CBN governor to resign. And then we could have a smooth thing. Otherwise, we'll become in life and stock in the international community, as we have always been.
Okay, on that note, Mukhtar Mohammed, I would like to thank you very much for joining us on this Live Sunday Talk Show today.